well, a horrible backstory to Lucy Blackman. It's a documentary on Netflix, and it's about the uh, disappearance and death of Lucy Blackman, who was a 21-year-old British woman who was living at least temporarily in Tokyo. And whilst she was there, she worked as what was called a hostess, which is not, is not something, sort of derogatory. It was somebody who worked in a special clubs where you would go and you would have nice conversations with people and have drinks together. And it was all very, I won't say innocent, but it was, perfectly reasonable. And off the back of this, people would also, the women who worked there would sometimes go and meet some of the patrons
Yep.
outside, might go for a meal or whatever. And at a point comes where Lucy disappears and is, off the face of the earth. No one can contact her, no one can find her. And it turns into a huge, missing persons hunt. They are, I mean, we know that, obviously that she was murdered, and it was all very, very awful. And the man responsible for it was a truly awful human
Well,
being.
could I just check? Is this a documentary or a TV show?
It's a documentary.
Okay, cool. On what platform did you see it?
Netflix.
Netflix, all right.
So it really it drills into the details of this, yeah, absolutely tragic, horrific, murder by somebody who, yeah, had a long track record of horrible, horrible, awful behavior. That it's eye-wateringly painful. But it goes through in a very interesting way, interviewing the family, moving back and forth with some of the Japanese police officers and
Yep.
detectives who had done the investigation. And it was a really, really interesting, very good piece of viewing. It was well structured. It was obviously distressing. There's no way you can watch something like that and not be distressed by it. But it was quite interesting to have the insight into the police force of a different country and how they react, the different nuances that they'd had, the different ways of working. And when we're so used to either seeing things about the police in the US, both through a lens of, law and order and whatever else, and through the frequently, obviously, because it only hits the news when it's awful, some of the awful behaviour you see from the police in the US, and likewise in the UK, where a lot of the things that make the press are about some truly awful behaviour. To see but what we know of these things, to see this contrast and to sort of appreciate what happened, what the impacts it was, what the emotional impacts, the long-term life impacts the entire thing had on everybody involved, on her family, and then see it structured so well in a really compelling and thought-provoking fashion, but not tasteless, it wasn't celebrating or
yeah. If we're going to talk about things that we don't like, I mean, we've spoken at length about true crime and how we even had a section on our YouTube channel where we're just talking about true crime is exploitative, and how I talk about the fact that I feel like a lot of true crime is just kind of like, it's like gawping at a road accident. It's like instead of calling 999, it's just like going, oh, look at that, oh my God, and also glorifying the person who did the crime. And there are some of them that manage to elevate and tell you something else. It sounds like you're saying this is one of those ones that managed to elevate.
Very, very much so. It's thought-provoking. It was insightful. They managed the tragedy of it very well, the complexities of the investigation. It's how they got to where they did, the
Yeah.
things that learnt. It didn't feel exploitative. It didn't feel like it was a, look, pretty blonde woman got murdered. It had depth. It gave you some insight, and I walked away thinking about it, and this goes back to, she was 21 and it was in about 2000
All right.
ish. She's
Oh,
nearly the same age as I am. Was nearly
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It would have been, yeah.
quite quite insightful. So I would thoroughly recommend it,
Oh, okay.
and I think it's a firm 4 star.
4 stars. Okay, cool. Bang on time.